against you. It is recording this time, audio. All right. Beautiful day, killer training.
Always. Yeah, I got you. Hey, what is this for? Because there's some lady downstairs.
This is an ABA training, mind your own behavior. Is that what she's looking for?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Something there.
Oh, national, yeah. I don't know where the lady went. There was a lady in here. She was ABA training, mind your own behavior.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Is that what she's looking for?
Okay. Ah! Oh, national, Shush.
Yeah,
Quiet me. So I'll have to cut all that off the front end, apparently.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, good news for you guys. We're not going to need 2 full hours with a group of 3 for this. That's exciting. We'll be done, hopefully, by 5:30 if we're efficient. That's my goal. So, everyone who's listening, ignore that I just said that. I'll cut it off the recording. All right, mind your own behavior. So this training came about as a result of something that I was often talking about in other trainings that I delivered as a strategy to help the students in the class not respond to the challenging behaviors that are happening around them. And people last year asked for a specific training on how to do what I call mind your own behavior, or MYOB. So that's what we're going to be going through today. It's really basically just the logistics of implementing and training that program to students in your classroom. So first, we're going to take a quick review of attention-seeking behavior and how you identify it, name it, measure it, and assess it. Then we're going to go and talk about the importance of social skills and to dealing with challenging behaviors. Talk about extinction bursts. We're then going to go through and talk about how practice is important. We're going to identify the rules that I typically use, and then you guys are going to spend time developing rules that you're going to be able to use within your environments. And talk about some warnings that you need to be mindful of when implementing a procedure like this. We're going to talk a little bit about making sure that it's not escape maintained, because you don't want to talk a little bit about how long it should take to implement correctly, and then we're going to conclude our session and be available for any questions that you might have. So let's first talk about attention-seeking behavior. So why do students misbehave? Or sorry, why do students engage in attention-seeking behavior? Because they want something. Okay, what else? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so they don't know how to effectively get what they want out of another person without being distracting or engaging in challenging behavior. Some people might call that poor social skills, right? Or language impairments. Okay, what else? What about because they're interested in the people around them and they don't know how to interact with them, right? Or it could just be that they're just not getting enough attention, right? So why doesn't it work if you just completely ignore attention-seeking behaviors? Why wouldn't that be a strategy that would work? Hi, thanks for joining us. Why isn't it effective to just ignore attention-seeking behavior? So if the maintaining variable is attention and you just ignore it flat out, that's not going to be an effective strategy. Do you know why? Because their needs aren't being met, so it will continue. Right. So if you don't give them another way to get their needs met, then the behavior is going to manifest in some other inappropriate way rather than in an appropriate way. And then the last question, who engages in attention-seeking behavior? Everybody. Every human being alive on this planet engages in some form of attention-seeking behavior. It's just whether it's appropriate and effective or not. Okay? A few viewers at home, make sure you guys hit that question and answer button if you need anything. Speaking of which, I need to turn on the question and answer button. There we go. It's on. You should be able to turn it on now. So when we talk about the assessment of attention-seeking behavior, there's ABC forms. Those of you who've had other trainings with us know about the structured ABC data sheet that we use. Some of the antecedents that you're going to look for that indicate to you that it might be attention-seeking behavior are if the teacher indicates that the behavior is, the antecedent was unknown. That generally means the teacher wasn't directly engaged at time, which might reflect a low attention situation. It might be that the antecedent was the teacher walked away, right? That indicates the termination of an attention situation. Teacher was interacting with another student, so that's a signal to the child having the problem behavior that you're not going to be able to interact with me right now because you're interacting with someone else. Peers may be playing nearby, or there may be some sort of unstructured time going on. Anytime you see one of those as the antecedents or anything similar to that, that might indicate to you that the behavior might be attention-seeking. But we also want to look to the consequences, right? So what are the most reliable consequences that the student receives for that behavior? And in that circumstance, we might look at things like student being redirected. Remember, a redirection is the delivery of attention, whether you like it or not. Another peer reacted to the challenging behavior, or the peer laughed at something the student did. Student was told no, right? So when you're telling a student no, generally you don't just walk up to them and say, no! Right? There's going to be no, and then there's going to be a whole conversation about why, and that's delivering usually quite a bit of attention for the student. And even sometimes for some students, it could be that the student was blocked from engaging in a certain behavior, and that physical attention might be the attention that they're seeking. So we're going to take 3 minutes in our groups, which would be all 3 of you. You are the group. And come up with a list of behaviors that need to be taught when we see a student engaging in challenging behaviors, seeking the attention of adults. So for example, raising a hand to answer a question might be a skill that needs to be taught to a student. So when we see a student engaging in attention-seeking behavior, not just the general class of all attention-seeking behaviors, but behaviors that are explicitly for the purpose of seeking the attention of adults. Amongst yourselves, I'll be listening. Thanks for the help, guys. You guys are doing great. Have one-on-one teaching session right now. Be awesome. I'm gonna have to edit that out now. Let me mute this. All right, so
You just cracked yourself.
I did.
That was awesome.
So what were some examples of skills that we would need to teach children who are engaging in attention-seeking behavior for adult attention?
Not screaming out.
So that's not a skill, that's the absence of a behavior.
Okay, to sit down. I'll use hers.
So be careful though, right? So remember, we need to find something that's gonna, no. So these are, this is why we do this, right? So don't feel bad, either of you. That it's not things that the teacher wants the child to do, and it's not things you want the child to stop doing. It's what skills can we teach the child so that they get that need met, right? So following directions isn't gonna result in the student getting more attention. Sitting down is not going to result in the student getting more attention, right? So we need to teach the student. So for example, a high school student, it might be raising my hand before I speak, right? You already had that example. Or it might be meeting with the teacher before or after class. Or it might be, what's another good high school example? Excuse me to the teacher when she's talking to someone else. Those would be examples. And high school is not a great place to get a lot of attention. So it's really, really hard, especially if we have a student who's gotten to that point where they still have a lot of attention needs, but we haven't addressed the skill deficits. So we have to kind of scaffold back. And it very well may be that we teach the student, there are other skills, like for example, putting a colored card on their desk, which will then signal to the teacher, I need you to come over here, right? Where it's not quite as overt and noticeable to other kids, but then the teacher knows to cue into it, right? For younger kids, it's saying, excuse me, it's tapping someone on the shoulder, it's telling stories about what they did yesterday. And you could even get into that more detailed set of like how to have a conversation with an adult. Here's what I did over the weekend. Answering questions on topic. That's a huge one. Right? I raised my hand, but now I'm talking about something that has nothing to do with class, which means the teacher's going to shut me down. I'm not going to get any attention, and then it's going to feel unsuccessful. That's why I'm going to start throwing chairs in the classroom, right? So you want to really hone down to what it is that the student can do that will still be less disruptive to the classroom, but still result in them getting the attention that they need. So we're going to try this activity one more time. This time it's going to be with attention seeking behavior, seeking the attention of other students. And that's going to be the main focus of our presentation today, right? Teacher behavior to control, student behavior is much harder to control. So what are some of the skills that we need to teach our students that are seeking the attention of other students? And the example I put up there is like, for example, telling jokes during unstructured times, right? So that's actually a very good skill for our students to have if they consider themselves to be funny. But we need to teach them how to do it at the right times under the right circumstances. It would need to be an unstructured time when the teacher's given them permission to do that, right? So talk amongst yourselves. This time try to really hone in on skills that we can teach kids that then would result in them being able to get more attention from other kids. Talk amongst yourselves. Engaged with him. So asking for bids to play and those sorts of things, absolutely. But sometimes I think that oftentimes I think we don't think enough outside of the box when we're thinking of peer attention-seeking skills. Because guess what? If I can walk up to you and say, hey, do you want to play? But then I don't have anything to go after that, I'll have you for about 3 seconds and I've lost you, right? Whereas, for example, so I used to do this with my students with autism at one of the schools in Mattapan a lot. I would go out on the playground with them and I would start a game of Red Rover, right? And that student would be at the center of it, but they'd see an adult leading a game and they'd be like, woohoo! And then I'd fade myself out of it. And then there it is, the student with special needs who has this entire circle of friends who are really, really interested in him because he's leading a game, right? Or red light, green light, and those sorts of things, where you've created something that the students wouldn't necessarily create on their own, and it's sanctioned by an adult so they know that it's allowed. And then you create a situation where that student's now getting heaps of attention without actually a huge amount of skill development, right? Social skills, super hard to teach. Foursquare, not quite as hard to teach. You know what I mean? So when we think about peer social interactions, they can be more simple than sometimes we make them.
Another one that I was thinking of is that child who always is seeking attention from the other students by being like closed up and kind of building their shield around themselves. And teaching them to let other people in on a positive note rather than everybody coming over going, are you okay, are you okay? Trying to teach them to be open, away from the shield, and children's attention by a positive way rather than, are you sure you're okay?
Yep.
Because that attention goes your way.
Right, and that's going to link in very closely to the mind your own behavior stuff we're going to talk about. Exactly. So that's actually a really good segue. All right, so social skills instruction. Social skills emerge because they work. And that's one of the most important things that people don't think about when it comes to attention-seeking behaviors. You need to teach the child something that is going to work, not just something that sounds good, right? So when we talk about peer attention, it has to be something that's going to actually make them cool enough that when a teacher's not standing over top of them, that they're actually going to still engage with them, right? Many children learn that being disruptive is the best way to be the center of attention. And that's when we run into this place where the student becomes the class clown and is very, very disruptive, knocking over chairs, engaging in pretty significant challenging behaviors. Don't teach social skills that nobody will respond to. The example there that I see all the time is teaching a student to tap you on the shoulder and repeatedly say, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. And of course, that's not likely to work for any length of time, right? It works at first because we're training it. And then after a while, it's, hold on, kid, go sit down. I want nothing to do with you right now, right? Because it's really annoying, right? And so we teach this not long-term effective skill that'll eventually be extinguished because nobody wants to respond to the kid who's constantly tapping them on the shoulder and saying, excuse me, over and over and over again, right? So when we teach, for example, if we do teach tap and say, excuse me, we need to teach tap, say, excuse me, and wait, right? And we don't successfully often teach that part. And charm is a skill. So what I mean when I say charm is a skill is, and I think I actually mentioned this earlier for you guys, teaching a child to be charming enough that people want to be around them is actually a very good survival strategy, especially for our students with special needs, right? So if they're cute enough and interesting enough that people want to be around them, even when they're not necessarily doing very much, people will be much more forgiving of the challenges that they have and the problems that they have because they are charming, right? Whereas students who tend to be more quote unquote annoying, they're the ones who are much more likely to be sent in for an evaluation for problem behaviors and kind of ostracized because they aren't, for lack of a better word, charming, right? And so when we work on this, we want to find behaviors that are going to make or support the student to be more endearing to others. That's when you really find something that's very effective for dealing with attention-seeking challenging behaviors is when you find behaviors that make the person more endearing to others, okay? So that's important. So this is a relatively long video, but I think it's actually really worth it. It details the extinction burst process and what happens if you don't see an extinction burst all the way through. Okay.
I've come up with a series of exercises to help with your compulsive need for closure.
Well, I take issue with the word compulsive.
All I'm saying is we live in a world where closure isn't always an option.
Shun. Okay. For the sake of argument, let's say.
So he finds it very reinforcing for things to be finished, right? She's now going to not provide him finishing.
I have a problem. Plan for addressing it.
I'm going to recondition your brain so that the need for completion isn't so overwhelming.
By playing tic-tac-toe.
Yep, your turn.
Oh, Amy. You wonder why people think neuroscience is nothing but a goofy game for diaper babies. Tic-tac-toe can only end in win, lose, or draw, none of which will deny me closure. Especially since I'm about to win.
I notice he's more frustrated this time.
Well, we
Experiencing an
didn't
emotional
finish.
reaction.
Exactly. How does that make you feel?
Same way any normal person would. Like I want to peel off my own face and tear it in two, and then again and again till I have a handful of Sheldon-based confetti.
And that's exactly the feeling we want to address with this course of treatment.
And that's
Or you
exactly
could
what it
pitch in,
feels
grab
like
a
when you
nostril, and help me get his face off.
Come on, you can do this.
Yeah, but you don't know what it's like to feel completely frustrated. And to have a desire build up within you and then be denied any opportunity for release.
Yeah, sounds like a drag. For the land of the free and the home of the... Next. It's quite an impressive layout, isn't it?
Yes.
Notice how tense and on edge he is.
Let's box it up.
It's back to that.
Starting to engage in new challenging behaviors.
That's enough.
Now he's trying to resist letting her stop him.
Give it! Okay, Sheldon, make a wish and blow out the candles. Oops, missed one. Now your wish can't come true.
Lucky for you, because I wished you were dead.
Inappropriate vocals.
Amy, I must say, I was skeptical at first, but this has truly been a transformative evening.
I'm a little surprised to hear you feeling so positive.
Well, you're an excellent neuroscientist, you're a wonderful girlfriend, and
This is called counter control.
doesn't matter, does it?
I'm proud of you, Sheldon.
And a complete sucker.
If you don't follow through, this happens.
Oh, yeah. There he is. And the home of the... Don't stop. Yes, keep going. Just like that. Almost there. Almost there.
And as a result
Sheldon?
of the fact that she didn't follow all the way through, that behavior is now much worse than it was before. So when we talk about extinction bursts, this is an example of a graph that would show us frequency of behavior as it relates to extinction bursts. What you see, following my little mouse around the screen, on this line here would be what the behavior looks like prior to intervention, right? So let's say you have a student who's engaging in attention-seeking behavior from peers in the form of making fart noises in class, right? And it's happening on average about this often every single day. Let's say that's 15 times. The number's arbitrary, it doesn't really matter. You decide to implement the Mind Your Own Behavior program, you've implemented it, and what you'll see at first is this spike in behaviors. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean just an increase in frequency, it might also be an increase in intensity. And so you might see kids making fart noises, And now he's going to start throwing out some swear words that he hasn't said before, or knocking over chairs, and those sorts of things. So along this path is what Sheldon was doing, where he was getting more and more frustrated with what, it's not Penny, it's, what's the character's name? I don't know the character's name. With what the young lady, MYOB Training, was doing.
His GF.
Yeah, his GF was doing along the path. Now, what happened is she left somewhere around here, right? It wasn't quite finished. And if you remove the controls you put in place during an extinction burst, when you're still in the extinction burst, then you're gonna see that become your new normal, right? So if we were to extrapolate out that video further, this would be his baseline, right? So he would be running around and trying to finish things repeatedly with quite explosive outcomes. And this would become the new level at which the behavior occurs. This is how really extreme behaviors get shaped up over time. They usually start out as relatively mild behaviors. People attempt to intervene on them and give up before they should be. And then that behavior becomes more extreme and more extreme and more extreme over time. If, however, follow the extinction burst all the way through, we then see this, which is the process of extinction occurring, where the student's behavior will then become less intense and less frequent over time. Generally, once you hit almost 0 levels, there will be a point that's called spontaneous recovery, where the behavior does resurge for a short period of time, and that's simply the student checking to make sure that all the controls are still in place, right? And as long as you respond the way that you have been responding, then you'll continue to decrease and then eventually go away. Make sense? Okay, good. So how can we shrink the size of an extinction burst, right? You can make it so that it doesn't have to be quite so big, especially if you're dealing with a student who already has some pretty significant challenging behaviors. If you're concerned that the increase in frequency and intensity will be too much for your classroom to be able to handle, then you can do these things that can help to decrease the size of the extinction burst. They won't completely remove it, but they can help to decrease the size of the extinction burst. So first and foremost, beef up reinforcement for any good behavior the student displays, right? So if the behavior is engaging in attention-seeking behavior from peers, you're then gonna essentially recruit some peers and make sure that they're giving that peer a lot of attention when they are engaging in some of those skills that you've been working on, some of those alternative strategies. Make reinforcement contingencies really clear. Consider using a contract if the student can read, or consider using a picture or visual if the student doesn't read, to really make it clear, here are the things that you're gonna get reinforcement for. If you do X, Y, and Z, then you're then gonna receive a lot of reinforcement. Things, then you will not. What? I don't know what's happening. Okay. All right. And then you could also have a signal for all students when attention-seeking behaviors will not be reinforced. So that would be the signal that you would associate with the Mind Your Own Behavior program. It could be a sign you put up on the board. It could be a necklace you put on. It could be something you write or say. And that'll make it very, very clear to the student when reinforcement for problem behaviors is not available. And this is what we call signaled extinction. Signaled extinction tends to have a faster effect because it's very, very clear when the student is and is not available for reinforcement. That makes sense? Good. So fire drills, AKA practice makes perfect. Why do we have crisis or fire drills? Do you know what caused us to start having fire drills in schools? Yes, there was a fire in a school building in Cincinnati and 173 children died. And that's when we started having fire drills in schools and lots of fire codes, like not having wooden stairways that go up the entire center of the building, right? That makes perfect sense with fire drills, right? Why are we not having behavior drills?
You can't really tell when someone's going to have a...
You don't know when you're going to have a fire, do you?
No. I don't know, it just doesn't...
Does it make sense to have behavior drills?
Well, I guess for certain behavior, yeah, but I'm thinking like extreme. Like I'm thinking...
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what this is for. It's for specifically extreme behaviors. So the answer is we should and we don't, right? So when students have very extreme behaviors, right? So let's say that you have a student who's prone to very explosive outbursts. We should have an entire class of students who are prepared to leave that room, given a specific code, and to go to a certain place where they can be safe while the teacher's responding to that student. right? So without repetition, we can't expect students to react appropriately in a crisis, right? That's just not fair because they haven't practiced the skill, just like with the fire drills. And the more predictable the routine, the more likely students will be able to navigate it, right? So that's what we're aiming for here. So I'm going to go into the 4 rule. Go ahead. Yep.
So they're kind of like the students in a classroom and they're just swearing up a storm. The teacher says leave. So then they know for next time when I swear in the classroom, she's going to ask me to leave.
So
that may either be good or bad.
Yeah,
If
right.
they're doing it, if they want to leave, then they know, well,
right.
I know how to get out.
Right. So that's the reason for the whole conversation about attention-seeking behaviors, right? So behaviors that exist for the purpose of obtaining attention from peers are the behaviors that we're going to address with this. Escape-maintained behaviors you're going to have to address a different way. The exit drills or the crisis drills for problem behavior, it's for other students to leave, not for that student, right?
Okay, so I'm trying to put it into my own life. I used to have a young man who used to run around the classroom where he could get his hands on to people.
Yep.
So I would just say to the class, library, and because I had a blocked off area of the library. The kids would all go into the library. I would take whatever I'm teaching, stand at bookcases, and get to any of the kids.
Yeah.
Is that what you're
It's very similar. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. It's a little bit broader than that. We're going to go into the details of how we've implemented it. But as far as the go to a safe space part of it, absolutely. Yes. Okay.
Because I would just continue to teach.
Exactly. And that's what you should do. That's exactly what you should do.
I would keep an eye on him. I was positioned so I could see him, but I was also not in the kids weren't in a position.
Right, and it puts the kids in a position where they're safe and they're not going to react to the problem behavior. So you're withholding all of that attention from the problem behavior. Yes.
The kids wouldn't move. I had a small enough group that they went and I had a table in the library and everybody sat around the table. And I had my back or my body positioned where the 2 bookcases came together. So he couldn't get into the grouping and nobody would be reacting with him.
Right.
So I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So these are the 4 rules that I use for the Mind Your Own Behavior program in the classrooms where I've implemented it. The first rule is don't mention the inappropriate behavior of others. Oftentimes I call that rule ignore and get rewarded. So you're going to fill that out in a little bit. Don't worry about it right now. And so I would teach the kids that as long as they didn't react to the problem behavior, that I would then provide them with reinforcement, right? So these would be posted on the walls just like any other rules, but they're on a separate place that goes along with the code, however it is that you're going to use to let them know these rules are now in effect, right? As well as the rewards that go along with those rules. Right? Those rewards and those rules are in effect is when they're on this separate piece, right? So that's the first rule. Don't mention, so often, he's on the phone, right? And that's way more annoying than the problem behavior is. So we're going to specifically teach kids not to say anything about the problem behaviors, okay? This is, just like anything else, a skill that needs to be practiced. Rule number 2, follow any direction I give you, even if it sounds weird. So that's, for example, play Simon Says and get rewarded, right? So you teach the kids that once you give the code, you're going to then, and then you're going to be able to get rewarded for that. So I've got a little video example of how you can still be teaching and implementing this. I was trying to skip this one. I missed it.
Mr. Thompson says, show me a point. A point
Right, so now imagine that right now there's another kid rolling around on the floor screaming and crying.
Jillian.
He has the attention of the entire class. They're all engaged. They're engaging in physical behaviors that are related to the math lesson that's going on. They're acting out shapes or different geometric phenomena, and they're defining them as a class, right? That's the lesson that's going on. It's a skill that the kids have. And this way, if he needs to say, all of you to the right side of the room, right? Because Johnny's picked up a chair, they're already primed and ready to go, following directions, visually engaged only with him, and they're ready to move.
Great job.
All right?
Christy.
So this is how we implement that.
What Christy says, you will write.
Rule number 3, keep focusing on your work. If you finish, start on your homework or an independent activity, AKA work and get rewarded. So far we have 3 rules, right? Don't tell me anything about the behavior and I'll reward you. Do anything I ask you to do, even if it's strange, and I'll reward you. And continue doing your work and I'll reward you, right? Now this rule is super important for if you have to physically get engaged with the student while this is happening, right? So let's say you're not going to be able to continue to try to de-escalate this student and help them through the problem. In this case, rule number 3 is important because instead of sitting there and watching what's going on, your students are going to be expected to be maintaining with their work even though you're not directing the activity at that moment in time. Done this with the students have packets of work of stuff that they are that's always prepared and sitting to the side so that they can then utilize those packets when this rule goes into effect. They grab the packet and they start doing their independent work, right? Depending on the age level of the kids, that's going to look different. It might be coloring for some kids. Okay. And this is an example of an actual student in an actual BPS classroom coming under the control of this exact rule. Rule number 3, work and get rewarded. So the student having the challenging behaviors back there in the back of the room, you see her? And she's screaming quiet and screaming and screaming. Notice that all the other kids in the room, except for this one here in the front who's covering his ears, and notice he's actually still doing his work. He's being a little silly about it. He's using his hands and his ears to turn the page in his book. But none of the kids in the class are getting engaged with this. They're continuing to do their center work. And this is a gen ed class, or an inclusion classroom, but this is a classroom that's got 22 students in it. And none of the students reacted to any of that screaming because they've been trained how to do this. That's what we want you guys to do. And students can and will and do this. They take their cue from you. If you as the teacher start having a meltdown from the problem behavior, they will have a meltdown from the problem behavior. If you, however, continue leading the instruction and having the expectations of them, they will. And the more you practice being able to respond this way, the better the kids will get at it. And rule number 4, this is something I always include, even if it's not likely to have to be needed in my rules. So let's say I have a student who I need rules 1 through 3 for because they engage in a lot of attention-seeking behavior from peers, but they're not generally dangerous. I still have this 4th rule just in case it happens. And the 4th rule is the exit code. You'll have a specific phrase that you only utter when it's time for the kids to step out of the room immediately. Mine is always purple monkey dishwasher. That's something you are never going to say at any other time ever in your life. So it's not likely that you're going to trigger the wrong thing by doing something else. And the key with purple monkey dishwasher is that there must be another place that the people know if your kids walk into the room without you, that something's gone wrong in your room. They need to call the office, give the kids something to do, and wait for help to arrive, right? So this is a worst case scenario. The building is actually on fire, right? For the fire drill example. So in this circumstance, you need to send the kids away because something very dangerous is going on. You can't leave the room with them, and you can't send anybody with them. Or if you have a para, or you can see somebody else in the hall, but they need to be trained and practice what to do in the rare and hopefully never circumstance where you can't go with them, right? So this is a worst case scenario. When you practice it, the other teacher should know your kids are on their way. You should say the code. They should all stand up, file out of your room, and arrive in that other classroom. They get a reward, some sort of a prize. They come back to your classroom, you have a little party and celebrate that it went well, right? Generally, a good place if you do have a librarian in your school is to send them to the library, like the actual library, not the classroom library. But if you can manage it in the classroom library, depending on the severity, you might have a rule 4 and a 5, right? You might have a code that says go to the library, or you don't need a code for that. You could say just go to the library. And then you might have another one that's purple monkey dishwasher, which is you can't stay in this room. It's not safe. Everyone please get out of the room. The examples of situations like this might be students breaking into a fight, broken glass that the student's using as a weapon, right? Those sorts of things. So an example might be a situation like this, where you might need to use purple monkey.
I said, you both gonna be home for 10 days. Bro, stop.
Right, so at this point, this teacher should have called a code. right? These kids, all the other ones, especially the one holding the cell phone, need to get out of the room. And now that someone could have been really badly hurt, beyond just these two students.
You're a little pussy, bro. Bro,
Hear that part when I was watching it before? Swear words, stop, red alert. But in that circumstance, had the teacher had a code, he could still be addressing the situation, all the other students out of the room, right? When you're in a situation like this, you're kind of stuck, right? You're trying to deal with this, you need to get the other kids out of the room, but taking your attention off of the fight long enough to do that is gonna then put the situation to be more unsafe. That's why, even if you're, is so very important.
I just find that so hard to do, especially in high school, because I think all the kids, all they want to do is record things.
Yep.
They want to record, they want to put it on Facebook. Like when the kid got stabbed at our school, it was on Facebook. They had it on World Star. I'm just like, you guys are ridiculous. Like it's
that's horrible. Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah. And so that's why practicing this and making it very, very highly reinforced is so very important, right? Just like a fire drill. When people hear a fire alarm go off, they don't question it. They don't pick up their cameras. They don't, they just get up and start heading out. May they be inappropriate along the way and maybe like herding cats? Sure. But there is a routine that they follow, that they followed since they were little. Follow, right?
something like that going on in the hallway.
In a hallway?
Like something that not only just your students, but it's like other students.
The need for a school-wide protocol. MYOB would be rolled out a school, and everyone would have the same code. If you say that code, the expectation, so if it's in the hallways, you might need 2 codes, right? You might have a specific rule 6 that says if I say purple stars are falling, right? Then that means you all need to go back to your class, and I'll get points for whatever PBIS system is in place or whatever, or versus purple monkey dishwasher, which is that you're talking to your class and they need to go to a certain place, right?
I know they recently implemented during the assembly when the students, because our school's Westie, so when you put a W, it means that everybody's quiet. So when teacher holds up a W, she waits for all the students to hold up a W, and then she knows that she has their attention. Something along the lines of that.
Exactly. You probably want it to be verbal and relatively loud, because if there's a fight happening, you need them all to hear you, right? But yes, something like that. And it would need to be taught and practiced school-wide, which is the really hard part, because most people resist the idea of practicing this because it takes time away from what they'd rather be doing. But it's important in circumstances like this. Yeah? Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Becoming 50 out here, like.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
if you're practicing reinforcement,
Exactly.
I think you would get
Yes.
that.
Practice and reinforcement. It can be done with students with autism, right? There's lots of reinforcement, and with a cognitive ability, you're going to need to practice it more, a couple times a week.
On the same line of the schools right now have been trying, all the schools are trying to implement, if somebody enters the building.
Yeah.
And introduced to a child who's, has a fire drill, that kind of
Yep.
thing. So it's just an extra one that you're adding on to already a supposed to be practiced.
Right. The locker
Thank you.
drills.
I couldn't think of that word.
Right.
I
So.
know, but I'm just saying, if you look at the data behavior, there's all these outliers on the graph. Any graph has 2
Yep.
outliers of them. I'm thinking of those.
Yep.
Extremes with outliers over there.
They can learn it. They can learn it. They may need support for a long time, but they can learn it. Absolutely.
You're the one taking the hand.
So we're going to circle back to this at the end. Since we're such a small group, I'm going to keep going through. But you're going to take 10 minutes and you're going to use that worksheet to what you would do if you were implementing this in your school or classroom, okay? All right, so when should you start doing this? Do we start fire drills after a fire? No. Why do we try to start behavioral preventive measures after behaviors start? Because they're inconvenient. People perceive them to be inconvenient. The interesting thing is with fires, the risk is so severe that nobody's willing to question the importance of a monthly fire drill, whereas I would again reiterate, doing this on a monthly basis is just as important. Think about the student who got stabbed, right? Had we had procedures in place to clear, well, it's a whole story, but in many fight in the classroom situations, that example of the video that I played, right? Those situations, if we have a protocol that's been practiced in place, even if not all of the kids clear out when that happens, if you get 80% compliance, there's 15 fewer kids that are right there in the risk zone to be harmed, right? So that's what we're looking for. As a standard practice, every year, this is a great tool to decrease the likelihood that behaviors will start. I recommend that people just do this every year, regardless of whether or not it's likely they'll have behavioral kids in their classroom. Just like you do a fire drill every year, whether or not it's likely you'll have a fire in your classroom. Some warnings that go along with this. Safety always comes first. Your first priority has to be the safety of the students. So in the circumstance where there is an unsafe situation that's unfolded, having this procedure in place means that you can say purple monkey dishwasher and most of your kids are gonna scoot, right? You don't ever consider reinforcement over safety, right? The potential for reinforcement never outweighs the potential for a student to be harmed or unsafe. So in that circumstance, we do whatever we need to do to keep students safe. Yes? Awesome. Beware of the dreaded extinction burst. When you first implement the Mind Your Own Behavior program, if the behavior is in fact intentions are going to cause extinction to occur. And in that circumstance, you're going to see the behavior intensify for a little while and get worse for a little while. Plan for that, right? So you need to make sure that you have an environment that is safe enough that you're going to be able to work your way through it, or that there's enough staff in the room that you're going to be able to implement it safely and effectively. If you're not going to be able to implement it safely and effectively, don't implement it, right? Safety comes first. Escape maintained behavior. This procedure will be highly reinforcing if the behaviors are escape maintained. So you're not going to want to use this for that. This is for your class clown, your kid who's trying to show off that he's tougher than everybody else, right? Those very attention embedded things that are the result of and deeply entrenched in the need for attention of our students, okay? Or the need to maintain their cred, for lack of a better word, right, for our students. And this isn't playtime, right? So while you're implementing this, if Johnny goes over and gets a toy off the shelf, you need to make sure that you're blocking that, right? Because if they get access to things, if they're on their phone, then in that circumstance, they're still contacting lots and lots of reinforcement while this is going on. You're ineffective, okay? So how can you be sure it's not escape? The simplest way to do that is to look for the extinction burst. If you start to implement this procedure and the student gets more irritated and more frustrated as a result of doing it, you're actually doing the right thing. If you start to implement this procedure and the kid's like, whatever, right, and they don't care, in that circumstance, the wrong thing, right? Chances are what you're doing is providing direct reinforcement to the challenging behavior. A more tougher but more accurate way to identify whether or not it's escape or attention seeking is to provide the student with an easy task and sit down and do it right along with them, and then provide them with a hard task and sit down and do that task right along with them. If you do both of those things and the student doesn't engage in challenging behaviors, then chances are the behavior is not escape maintained. Because if the behavior was escape maintained, no matter how much attention you gave me in that harder task condition, I'd still have the problem behaviors, right? And then if you really, really want to be sure, you can take it one step further and provide the student with the same easy and hard tasks, but in that circumstance, don't provide attention to the student. Because even with the easy task, the student has the problem behaviors, right? If you see those two things emerge, where with the hard task, given lots and lots of attention, the problem behavior doesn't happen, then chances are it's attention seeking. And if you see even with the easy task with no attention, the problem behavior still occurs, chances are escape maintained. Does that make sense? Good. How long should it take? How long should the teaching of this program take? Well, the challenge is that different kids are very different. The older the kid, the longer it's going to take. And that can be really challenging with the extinction burst. So my recommendation is to take data, right? If you see it still going up like this, and it's on a steep upward trend, that actually means you're doing the right thing. I know it seems odd, but that means you're on that curve for that extinction burst, and you don't want to give up while you're up here, because that's going to become your new normal. And then usually within a couple weeks to a couple months, you'll see that flip over. It shouldn't be more than 2 months. If you're at 2 months into trying to do this, you probably need to consult someone from our department to make sure you're doing the right thing. And bless you for having the follow through to be able to do it for 2 months. And then it should tip down and start coming back down. So it depends on the student. And then you should look for in the data, you might see a honeymoon period where as soon as you first start implementing it, things just go away and they get better. Don't be fooled. It means it will come back in most circumstances. And then you'll see the extinction burst, and then you'll see that slow and steady decrease that I've talked about. It won't just go away overnight. That's not how these things work. So in conclusion, I told you I'd get you guys out of here early. Boom. Be sure that the function is attention. Remember, practice makes perfect. So the more you practice this procedure, the more likely it is that it will be effective. Teach these rules just like you would any others. Tie rewards to successfully following the rules. That's a critical piece. So you have to have some sort of a reinforcement system in place for the students for when they are able to follow these rules. For older kids, it's going to be more social stuff like downtime, free time, you can have your phone out, whatever. For younger kids, it might be more tangibles or edibles or those sorts of things. That's all fine. Skills. Teaching a complementary set of skills for these attention-seeking behaviors, they will not go away. The children need to have successful ways of getting their needs met. If they don't, they will reappear in other ways forever. There's no way to just make them stop without teaching the complementary skill that the student's lacking that resulted in this problem behavior to begin with. And then always assess for escape as a function. If you don't assess that, you may be directly reinforcing the problem behavior. For example, just ignoring a kid who's not wanting to do the work or it's not doing the work. And that's not the strategy you want to use. So this is not a strategy for escape maintained behaviors. This is a strategy for attention seeking behaviors. Questions, comments?
So the skills that you're telling us to teach are the ones that are
Those 4 rules, yep.
those 4 rules.
So on that sheet that you guys have, these are the 4 that I use typically. Ignore and get rewarded.
I like that.
Place, yeah, that's fine. Ignore and get rewarded is the first one that I use. The second one I use is play Simon Says and get rewarded. For high school kids, you might want to change the name of it a little bit. The third one I use is work and get rewarded. And the fourth one I use is called Purple Monkey Dishwasher, right? And that's the code, right? That's the exit code. So Kylan and Steph,
Yes.
will you stay with them while they work on their sheets so I can?
Yeah.
I did a good thing, right? I got through most of it.
Oh, well, all of it, right?
Yeah, no, I did, except for the 10-minute activity.
Yeah.
So if you guys will do that and they'll give you feedback or be supporting you on that, and I'm gonna.
Can we get access to this PowerPoint online somewhere?
Yeah, you should have gotten an email.